Thanks for coming, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So we have, there's not really a format, right? But I know that I'm going to introduce myself maybe and move around. But I'm really interested also in knowing who the audience members are. I find that helps make spaces really comfortable when we do introductions. Is everyone cool with that too? Yeah. Maybe you can start with.
Okay. My name is Kathleen Bailey. I'm a program coordinator at IRCO, which is an immigrant and refugee community organization here in Portland. And the program I work in is called Summer Work. So we work to match youth in paid internships across Multnomah and Washington counties. And last summer we placed a little over 1,100 youth into paid internships.
My name is KatMeow Garcia. I am the media education manager here at Open Signal. We worked actually with several youth from IRCO last year, and they were fabulous. We did some on-site job training, professional development, and also had the youth working as peer mentors for several of our summer camps, doing everything from helping film and learning equipment and editing software to child wrangling and making sure that youth has sex and we're feeling great and happy. We have a really special education program here that doesn't really center around like the typical post-school education. It's more student-centered, and we'll probably talk more about that later. But
Hi, I'm Annabo. I have a lot of hats, but today in this panel, I'm an audio engineer. I have a studio down the road on MLK. I open the studio up for free to any people of color or queer and trans youth for free to learn, and I teach them for free how to produce music and how to record bands and do live sound and stuff. And I also am a multidisciplinary artist, so I work as an acoustician and as an audio engineer for several different institutions and venues in this space. So I'm working at PICO on Saturday for the Met Gala, for example. And my day job is the Diversity Inclusion Manager at Impact Northwest, which is one of Oregon's oldest nonprofits. We serve 36,000 people per year. And I also, at the same time, run a youth program in Beaverton for undocumented families. And I think that's it for now, but I've lived in the States for 3.5 years, and I've trained, I'm a radical educator, so I've trained people from over 100 organizations in inclusive practice, including youth and disabled folks and refugees and immigrants. So I think that's mainly it for now.
For now. My name is Louie. I work as the Director of Promotions and Community Outreach for KAOS Community Radio based out of the Evergreen State College. And I also work as a news writing fellow for the Office of Marketing and Communications. And as far as the youth aspect of things, I work, I've been involved with a lot of different youth advocacy, but specifically like child welfare and foster care advocacy. So working with like youth to help them like tell their stories and like learning like as far as like strategic sharing and like elevator speeches, and also just like helping them like get out to like different like media outlets and like just communicate their stories. So yeah, definitely. And I currently I serve on the board of directors for California Youth Connection, that nonprofit that I work with now. So I'm definitely very excited to be here. And yeah, I'm also 19 years old, so I feel like very connected with like, I don't like to say a whole lot, but like, I'm pretty much a youth myself. So.
Yeah, you pretty much. Louie is awesome.
That's awesome.
Obviously. I also forgot that I work for KBOO and .fm, and I mainly like run the POC spaces there, and not spaces, but the monthly kind of caucus, and also train folks in beloved community, which means anti-bias and inclusive practice training there too. And I'm a musician, and you reminded me of something else, but it's okay. It'll come out in the conversations.
And that reminds me that I also am on the board of directors at KBOO Community Radio, and I'm really, really interested in creating safer spaces for people of color and queer youth and grown-ups as well. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Should we start?
Audience.
Oh, my name is Drea Rodriguez. I also work for Summer Works at IRCO.
Sorry. My name is Nan Cohen. I'm affiliated with the LPFM in Eugene, Oregon. It's KEPW.org. Yay!
My name's Lexi Meek. I work for the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission and also the Office for Community Technology at the City of Portland.
Matt Schuster with Public Media Network in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Sonia Hollins, Public Media Network in Kalamazoo.
My name is Ashley Kruger and I work at Capital Community Television in Salem and I'm the media instructor.
I'm Phil Theobertis, also at CCTV, and I am the music producer and audio specialist.
My name is Ivana Horvat. I am a digital media producer at Metro East Community Media out in Gresham.
I'm Andrew Bright, the media facilitator at Thurston Community Media, Olympia, Washington. Run half the summer camps, so I thought, hey, this sounds good.
Cool.
My name is Gabe Shelton. I am also at Thurston Community Media. I'm an intern and also a student at Evergreen. So,
Yeah, alum. Yeah.
Greener. Oh, yeah.
do you count as a youth? I guess so. Yeah, I'm 21. Okay, so I'm still a youth.
Embrace it as long as you can.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl Williams. I'm from the city of Redlands, California. I'm the multimedia production coordinator, a one-woman show. Television broadcasting is what we do. But connecting and engaging with youth, I'm really interested in this class, so thank you. Yes, sir. You used to live in Redlands.
Beautiful networking, right?
Yeah, this is why you do it.
I've been doing it for almost 20 now, so the local government access channel, planning commission meetings, city council meetings, I do my safety videos, PSAs, currently use the old-fashioned bulletin board that's when there's not regular programming, but I think Cast Us is going to be my new toy here real quick. Yes, it's nice to meet everybody. Thank you.
Snick around me? Yes. I'm Rebecca Friedman. I am on the board of the very, very newly licensed KTQA 95.3, and then my husband is the engineer for both that and then KTAH LPFM, which is a radio Tacoma. And I'm also an ELL and Spanish teacher in South King County in Washington. Like me today.
Hi, I'm Seth Ring. I'm the Director of Education and Volunteers at Metro East Community Media. I want all of your cards because we're trying to grow our program. We have a program called Rockwood DIY, Digital Inclusion in Youth, and we have a bunch of workshops out there, and I'd love to get some ideas and make some connections.
Hello, I'm Kirsten Fabian. I'm from Helena, Montana. We're Helena Civic Television. We're a traditional PEG channel, and currently we have very little youth involvement. So I'm going to take everything I can away from you guys today.
My name is Lisa White, and I'm the office assistant at CCP in Salem.
My name is Mike Connor. I'm from the city of Kirkland. I'm a video production specialist, and I help the Kirkland Youth Council with a yearly program they call We've Got Issues. And also did my first teen video production workshop this last winter, and so I'm interested in continuing that.
Hi, I'm Betty McCardle, the Community Media Assistance Project, and I'm also co-chair of the upcoming Grassroots Radio Conference, which will be in Portland in October. And as co-chair with Becky Myers, who I'm sure a lot of you know, we're hoping to involve youth more than has been the case in more recent GRCs. I was in a class with Anna last week.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Smith, and I'm with the GRG, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, and I'm a producer here at KatMeow.
I'm Melody Ashford. I'm the executive director of Mount Falls Media Center out of Oregon City, and always continuing to try to find new programming for youth. We've had some things off and on again. In the 90s, we had a pretty successful program we called Teen TV, Teens Independent Educating Network, and I kind of fell off, so I'm looking to try to get something like that on again.
Well, I think that we're all here because we realize that youth are extremely valuable for our community media productions, and that they're typically very marginalized when it comes to mainstream media and basically everywhere, honestly. Youth are often looked at as less than human in mainstream everything, whether it's economically or education or media, but we're gonna focus on media here, of course, and getting youth involved. And that is a really important foundational idea that needs to be recognized by folks who are running or starting to collaborate with youth. And something that I wanted to share that we do at Open Signal, and we're going to start integrating it into our adult education classes as well, but specifically we started with youth, was introductions like this. Because right now I feel, I don't know if everyone else feels it, but I feel a lot more connected to every single person here, and I feel like I can identify things that we could all, like each one of us, collaborate together on, or in groups, or like I'm having these like brainstorms and it's inspiring me. Whereas if we would have just, us four started as like the officials and you all in the audience sat back and just listened, it really creates a barrier. And I've noticed in education that, mainstream education, that barriers just stop the creative process. They really draw it to a halt. So that's something that we do in every single class with youth, is have an introduction period. At every single following class or camp, if we're running like a longer camp, we start with an opening circle. And it can be any kind of intentional activity that brings the group together and like lets youth really like find out who each other are. Because something that is important about classes in media is that, and in the industry, is that networking is super, super important. So if you start with a foundation of like, we are together in this, we know each other, and we can make these connections, it really, really helps youth network outside of the organizations that you're building these programs in. So I would say that that's one of the best basis for beginning something, is that introduction and continuing that connecting piece. We also do a closing circle at the end of every class or day of camp for youth, and we really want to start implementing that in our adult courses as well. The closing circle brings the group back together. It allows the folks involved to share any issues they had, or maybe their triumphs, and having it be kind of like a cheerleading and like, yeah, we did great, even if it's a little triumph, really, really helps. Because there's a lot of stuff out in the world that's telling us as humans that we are not good enough, we don't do enough, that it's not perfect enough. That's really not true. We were perfect if you watch Mr. Rogers, right? We're all perfect when we were born. We have some gifts to give. And so taking those messages and being like, no, bye negativity, right? Bye. With a closing circle that brings people up and like makes them focus on something positive, really, really helps. And it also gives you a chance to like say what you're gonna do next, which typically youth and people, just people in general, want that. What's happening next? What's the next step? And then they're feeling that like kind of inspiration of their little triumph as well. So it really helps set the stage for the next class. So those are the two things that I think are really important.
Yeah, I guess just to build off that, like, I'm really glad that we did introductions as well. Just because of the fact, like, yeah, we may be the 4 panelists, but like, any of you guys really could have been panelists here to talk about your experiences and like working with youth. And I think, yeah, one of the most important things as far as working with the youth is like the interactivity that you do within whatever sort of teaching environment it is, but like specifically like workshops and stuff like that. Like when you're working with youth, like there's definitely like, there's like kinesthetic learners, like visual and audio, and youth really tend to like follow towards that kinesthetic line. So like finding ways for them to get hands-on, whether that's like an actual tour itself or just like a workshop about like elevator speeches. I actually hope if we have time, I have like a quick icebreaker that I'd like to show y'all that I like to do usually. But yeah, I think that, yeah, just remembering the importance of youth, but specifically youth within this medium. I feel really happy because like this is my first time, like no offense, but like my first time like seeing like really young people like, you know, engaged in a conversation like this. Like
that young man. Sorry.
Yeah, but and you know, like there's all these like, you know, like statewide like, you know, board meetings and representative meetings for different like community media like people, but like a lot of the time that demographic, like we all know that demographic is like older and white, and you know, and there's not necessarily that I guess the awareness for what community media is and like why it's important. I feel like a lot of the times like within an educational scope, you can get a lot more, I mean not with every single instance, but a lot of times you can get a lot more of like an autonomous and also like more, I guess, influential experience working if you do an internship with a community media station versus doing it with like CNN or like something of like, you know, like a corporate news network. And that's because you really get to be hands-on with the equipment. You get to see yourself in multiple hats, like you said. And I think that that's really the power in it. So it's not necessarily that the power is going away, it's just like how do we disseminate the importance of it out there, so.
Yeah, I want to change gears a little and like back up a bunch and talk about how access is determined by, you know, privilege and education and kind of how some things are just not visible. So like opportunities might be there with all your different projects, but they might not just be visible to the communities that you're trying to include. So there's a couple of things here. Like one, some people want to include youth to tick off boxes and to say that they served a demographic for numbers and for grants. That is not the conversation I'd like to have. I'd like to have a conversation in terms of giving youth autonomy and voice and really valuing their individual contributions not as a number. And two, in order to do that, partnerships are super important. And in this society, we live in a nation where people are rewarded for being hero media people. So like I'm the person that got to collect these youth and I'm known for it. And the youth isn't important. What's important is that I was the enactor of this. And also, so that, and then my organization is more important and I want to get all the credit. So it's really hard to partner with other organizations in case we don't get the grant again next year or whatever. So there's these barriers, which is competitiveness and competing for resources and stuff that keeps us like away from me calling IRCO and saying, hey, do you have any kids that you met that would be really awesome on the radio? Cool, send them over to KBOO. Like I want to make those calls all the time, and I think partnerships and building mutually beneficial relationships is important. So thirdly, I write for Street Roots. I teach comics classes for queer and trans youth in North Portland, and I do the KBOO thing, and all of those are different types of media. However, what am I giving to people? Like when the next time I interview someone for Street Roots, what am I offering them? You know what I mean? Like why am I tokenizing them? Am I just asking them to come in so that I can shine the spotlight on them and then like throw them back? Or am I trying to uplift them and give them something that is sustainable? So kind of looking at the relationship and the exchange and saying, okay, I'm going to open this workshop, but how am I going to then foster their growth after that? How am I going to help them be independent human beings or find their voice or like really nurture that? So there's a couple of levels there of like getting them in the building once they're in the building, and then not just kicking them out of the building, but also understanding the relationship side, not the transactional side. So that's my little rant for now. That's great. Oh, and I had a question. Do you work with Rosewood Initiative?
Not yet.
Okay, but I can give you Marissa's email.
That would be awesome. I mean, that's
cool.
part of what I'm looking for is connections.
Cool. Yeah. And geographic connections are awesome because, like again, all people are doing different things, but all those different things are connected and interrelated. So even if you're doing something totally different, if you're in the same place, you're probably still serving the same people from different angles anyway.
Could we ask questions too now?
I
Or do we wait?
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think that that'd be a good format.
Okay,
Like,
thank you. My question is I have a volunteer that does a Wednesday pet of the week, okay? So she volunteers to do that, and then I've now taught her how to edit it. So, but I've gone to our local high schools, and we have 5 high schools in Redlands, and done my pitch to them to get them to intern. And what I find it's very hard, because I have such a busy schedule, you know, I can teach them, but I can't look over their shoulder the whole time. So how do I get youth? I'm going to the digital media classes and giving my speech to them, but then I get such a turnaround on the youth. They kind of get burned out. We kind of did this teen thing where it was like the teens from the different high schools, one from each high school came and spoke on what's going on at their school or what's gone wrong, and then that kind of fizzled out. So how do I keep youth involved in our local government channel that they utilize?
Yeah.
Without giving them too much rein, because it's all going to be scripted and approved by, you know, I mean, they can't just speak freely without it being approved.
I think it's important to always look at the paternalistic body that is providing the thing and whether that even meets the needs of the community. So always paying attention to the community. So in your case, those kids, and being like, what do you need? What do you need from us? What can we do better? Is a 2-year program too much for you? Do you prefer to just call in? Do you prefer to do it remotely? Do you prefer, so kind of like always constantly looking at the changing community needs and then addressing those needs however in your power, whatever leveraging you can do with your access and your power and your privilege, to then tailor the program. So the program isn't set in stone. Like, who says it has to be a 50-hour course? What, like, can it just be a 3-hour course and then they do the rest with their friends? Also mentorship. So you have a kid that's been there for a year versus a kid that's been there a month, and having those mentors. Yeah, setting up those mentorships, but that also giving the kid that's been there longer the power to feel like, oh, I can teach this, and also you learn better when you teach, right? So kind of, yeah. So like recognizing all the different levels of engagement. Some kids are not going to be able to come into the building a lot, and that's okay. How can we engage with them in different ways? They love the internet, they love Instagram, so can I engage with them through an Instagram course or something? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know how to use Instagram.
Oh, right. That's what
that would be a perfect example of like how you could engage the youth. A lot of the time it's figuring out like what are their interests and what are they already working on, even if it's not even if it's not necessarily in the occupational sense of what they're working on. A lot of the times, like whether it's YouTube or Instagram, like social media networking, like they're already doing all of these things, but they just don't realize that those same things have the potential to really gain clout in the professional world. So I think it's just important, it's hard to, like when you're busy to like sit down and talk with like each and every person, but just sort of identifying like what their goals are from the jump, so you can align what parts of the work that you need to be done to what their goals are for who they want to be or what they want to do in the future.
You know, I just like to add to that with volunteers that I've had in the past, say, 10 years. I've been very fortunate that they have, you know, graduated high school, gone on to college, you know, graduated college, and 4 of them are actually out in the entertainment field now, making their own films and editing, you know, 911, and so it's been really great to watch these kids grow to live their dream too. But it's hard to find 1 or 2 good ones a year that are really, really dedicated and interested.
I think it's that framing of good ones that might be not problematic, but different to a different model. And the alternative model would be different people engage differently and they use knowledge differently, and they might become something else. They might not work in entertainment, but they might become a politician, or they might become like a teacher, but they're still using all the skills that they sucked up, that they absorbed in that course. So kind of understanding that everyone processes differently, holds knowledge differently, and then again reproduces that differently. So maybe the other kids I'm sure they're still holding those.
Well, I've never even thought about them allowing them to do their own like YouTube feed. You know, while they're doing their across the board from the high schools, letting them send their own YouTube feed. That's a good idea. I think that would actually help me attract more.
And then often programs are site specific, and that's an issue too. If kids really want to do a Vox Pop interview show just in their high school or in their middle school, then why are you asking them to come? Not you, but why are people asking them to come into the building? Like why do they have to sit in the studio when they really want to do a show on campus, for example? So kind of changing the expectation of sites, of outreach, of the central service versus a multi prismed like partnership. So kind of, yeah, and again, understanding that we're not trying to pump out perfect little copies of people that do the exact same thing. Everyone's going to end up following their bliss anyway, you know? So.
Thank you.
Just for one quick thing too, that just to jump off of what everyone's been saying, something that I keep rattling around in my head in a good way, like that neat spray can, sound, is look for ways to say yes. That is like something that's always back here when I'm working with folks who are interested in media. Look for ways to say yes. Just like Anova said, like whatever you have in your power, utilize it. And even the folks that aren't doing stuff afterwards, after the program that like super fit in, think outside the box. If they're a politician or something else that isn't really, if they go into some other field, they can still be a really valuable member of the network that's helping your new programming, right? Thinking outside the box.
Yeah, the saying yes, we have a lot of traditional rules around our equipment checkout, and that just does not work. Like you can't, like we're like, it's gotta be 72 hours or whatever, and it's like, it's like the kid's either gonna use your equipment or they're gonna go out with their cell phone and shoot it on their own. And that's the choice I think most community media centers are facing right now. It's like, you can empower or you can restrict. And that's like, we really need to focus on the empowerment. Like, what can we do to say yes to people? Like, what software do you need?
Or you can provide access and outlets. So
Yeah.
say everyone's filming on their phone, and I did see your hand, but say everyone's filming on their phone, then change the model and be like, well, maybe equipment's not the thing. Maybe we just need a framework to be like, let me funnel you into this outlet and like this media and this. So it just kind of again, adapting to what people are already doing. And also, did you know Rosewood Initiative has a recording studio?
I do.
Okay, great. Just checking. Sorry.
There was a hand.
Yeah, internships. So you have lots of different community media organizations, some of whom have paid staff, some of whom are still very volunteer run. The ones that I'm working with in Tacoma are still very bare bones volunteer. And we're struggling a little bit to recognize when it's appropriate or inappropriate to say, well, we don't, as a staff of individuals with specific talents, know how to do this. Let's get one of the college kids to be an intern to do this. And so I struggle with trying to convince my own, like people that I'm working with to say an internship has to offer some benefit to the person who's interning. But then what would be a motivator for someone to do an internship that isn't paid? Because I value very much the problems of like this internship economy where only, rich kids get to have the privilege of doing an internship because they don't have to do a paid job during this particular time. So anything that you can speak to on that?
Maybe Kathleen could speak to that. Since
Yeah, I mean, we're a little bit fortunate in that groups like yours, if they're in Portland, like you are subsidized by our program. So for folks like we have interns at Open Signal, we have interns that go to KAOS, and it doesn't cost those sites anything to host youth except for the agreement to, supervise and give them meaningful work. And then we get funding from the county government, the city government, the Oregon Labor Board, and then that then funnels in, as well as we go after like sponsorships from bigger companies, but nonprofits and government agencies don't need to pay, so it's a little bit.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, didn't that start because there was a need and there was someone recognizing that's a barrier for a lot of people? And Tacoma does have less money in that county, unfortunately, but can you speak to like how it started and who saw the need and when that model began?
And were you paying them from your organization?
Yeah, so we're the employer of record, and so we take that responsibility. But the program actually started during the recession. It was federally, it was like part of Obama's economic stimulus program in 2009. So that's when it started in Portland. But because it was so successful, then that was when we had a couple county commissioners and people in the city that saw the value in youth having varied work experiences. And so then that was when they started budgeting for the program. And that's why it's been able to grow without the federal funding, and been able to grow to the point where it is today.
So how did that happen? What avenues did you have to go through to secure that funding, or to convince these leaders that the funding is worthwhile?
I think a lot of it was the leaders at the time. So it was, politicians that were in place locally that decided that it had an impact on the community. And I think a lot of that was, they did this study where they found that there were, I think, 30,000 kids or youth in between the ages of 16 and 24 that were not connected to school or work. And so another thing that we do in our program is we try to connect them with career path opportunities and other resources when the summer ends. And that's like the demographic that we target.
Are there grants available for programs like that? Like specifically for kids that are not affiliated with school or work situation?
Yeah, that's where the government funding comes in.
I mean, like federal grants kind of stuff. Is that a possibility, or is that?
There's been federal cuts more recently. Yeah. ODE and other, what you would normally apply for federally there's been significant cuts in the last 2 years.
Oh,
yeah, but statewide, there at Portland City, statewide there are definitely a lot of awesome grants that you could definitely apply for if it was a youth program. Program grants, project grants.
I know too, because you said you're from Tacoma, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I work just specifically for that. I work with the Center for Community-Based Learning and Action, and I know nationwide, just as grants are getting cut, so is work-study programs. But I think that's also a great alternative to look into, if that's a decision that your organization can make, because the funds that come out can be anywhere from 0 to 25% of what you would pay for normally 100% of having that staff member. But also there's tied learning objectives of what they're going to learn, and a mission. So sort of a plan outline for that. But I know just to specifically make a shout out to that, I know the Evergreen Tacoma campus is still looking to match work study students to sites for next year. So that might be something that you want to look into, as far as maybe if that's something that would be possible for you.
And it's called work-based learning, community work-based learning?
The Center for Community-Based Learning and Action. And that's on the Evergreen campus, but that's just on the Olympia campus. But they do work in Tacoma as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to speak to what you can offer as a benefit if there isn't funds to be paying. I know here we have the IRCO paid internships, but we also have unpaid internships, and what youth and folks who are doing those internships get is access to training for free, access to resources that they can check out for free, and invites to special events. So you may have a screening that maybe you're selling tickets to. Well, for your intern, because of their work and dedication, they would get into something like that for free.
We also give food.
Yeah. Food.
It seems
Always
so
food.
stupid, but
No, it's not.
It's I make sure that there's food available. It's that you're working for free at the very least we can give you.
That's a fundamental trauma-informed care, is to provide food.
Yeah, there's a lot of food insecurity that it goes unseen. So it's always, and I want to really stress this, it's one of our policies that when we have camps and youth workshops where there is food available, it's really important not to restrict youth when it comes to food, because it can really trigger folks, and you don't know where they're coming from or what they've been through, and just find ways to say yes within reason, right? So it's a really important thing not to be pointing out if a youth is taking more than someone else or something like that. That's a really important thing. Thanks for bringing up food. Yeah, no food shaming.
Yeah.
No, I really I feel that experience firsthand, because when I got into foster youth advocacy, I was only 13 years old, 12 or 13. But the whole reason I started going is because there was this little there was this hub, and there would always be kids around eating McDonald's and KFC, and I was just at the time, now it's just whatever, I wouldn't want it. Every once in a while, but I was I need to get in this, so food, those little things, having the food and snacks, or even just icebreakers, things to remind youth that they're still there to have fun, that's what they'll remember,
Yeah, kind of like the direction this is going, because we don't think about like the pyramid of needs a lot, but as working in Beaverton and in this program that I work in, I provide a place for kids to sleep as well, because a lot of the kids haven't had enough sleep because they don't have space in their cars or wherever they happen to be sleeping that night. So trauma-informed care, recognizing when kids are triggered and or in need, but specifically what I'm saying is all of your programs have the capacity to offer kids and young people, one, to meet their basic needs. So if they're hungry and they need money because they need to survive, then recognizing those things before asking a bunch of other things on top of that. Because what I see often is like, you do this and this and this and this for me, but I'm going to ignore the fact that you are really tired and you're hungry and that you need like money right now to catch the bus. You don't even have money to catch a bus into my program, but I'm going to pretend I don't notice that. Like, I've seen that so much. Like, yeah. So that, and then recognizing that your program or everyone's programs has so many advantageous outlets that would be attractive or appealing to people. It's just hard to see it sometimes if you're in it, you know. But like you said, like tickets to things, food. There's, especially if you're getting donors, like people donating various things. I know this is a weird thing to say, but prestige and the pure like association with KAOS, for example, is just really exciting for a lot of people. So yeah, there's social capital too. Yeah.
And is it easier for you to get these services, like you said, McDonald's and KFC and gift cards, because you're a nonprofit? I'm not a nonprofit, so for me to offer something like that, it's coming out of my own pocket, which could cost.
So I'm really good at hustling, and whether I'm a nonprofit or not, I just email every single Stumptown Coffee, Great Trader Joe's, what's the one, New Seasons, the Oregon Food Bank. I just email them all the time, and I'm like, what can you give us now? What about now? What about now? Oh, July 1st, okay, I'll come back then. But I just ask. I ask, and it doesn't matter that I'm an individual or a nonprofit. It's just a matter of asking.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah, most food places that produce food already have a ridiculous and somewhat disgusting amount of waste.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks, if you just talk to them or email them, will be like, sure, because I'd rather it go somewhere and meet someone than either.
That's a write-off for them.
That's true, yeah. So I've never actually looked this up myself, but maybe someone knows off the top of their head. Are nonprofits allowed to use, maybe through the language of our charters, services like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or is that like...
Mine has done that before, and that's fine, especially for specific programs.
Yeah. Didn't KAOS just have one?
Yeah, KAOS just had one.
That's how we get our antenna up.
And because we run like 50 different programs within the umbrella, each one has had different fundraising stuff. Like I just for fun, I went to my tattooist and I was like, "What do you think?" And she's like, "Yep, I'll put in a fundraiser." And every single person that got a tattoo that one day, all the money went into our organization. But there's like so many different ways you can fundraise and get resources and get things that are fun and cool. And it doesn't have to be material. Like I'm trying to think of a really good example. But the other day I hooked up this really cool family that works at KAOS with a free dinner with a bunch of the Blazers, for example, because the kid Javin loves loves the Blazers. So I was like, well, yeah, actually 6:30 Thursday, they're all going to be there. Food, you can go hang out with the Blazers. So just like it doesn't have to be stuff. It can just be hooking up whatever you think people would like.
A memory they'll never forget.
Oh yeah, he loved it. Yeah, he loved it.
I think selling your internship too, like what previous, use the strengths of media. Like we can sell the experience by showing them video that previous interns have shot. That's one of the ways I
we'll give you credits.
Yeah, and we've had like one of our interns had her stuff shown for like Portland City Council, and like every single time now I'm like trying to recruit interns. I'm like, look at what this high schooler did, college person. Look at what you could do,
Okay. Can I ask you a question, Gabe? Okay.
I love it.
I like that.
Love it.
You be an intern. What would make you want to be an intern?
I get a stipend. So it's like not. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is since I'm a college student is credit.
So it's
Oh, yeah.
sort of like, instead of going to class for that many credits, I'm there. So like, it's not like a major hurdle to not get like the full hourly wage, because if I wasn't there during those hours, I would just be at school for the same amount of time. So I don't think that works with high school students as much, but if you can get credit, that's really valuable, because people, if you're in school already, like it's just a different side.
And then doing something that you're enjoying and you want to pursue.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a big. Right, that's the whole reason.
And that's interesting that you said that maybe not in high school, right? But we're asking folks to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Maybe not in high school yet. What if you talk to the principal? What if you talked of these 5 schools, right, in your area?
We just did a high school internship also during the January mini term with the STEM school in Tacoma. It's called Sammy Science and Math Institute. And they have like January terms, sort of like in colleges, but it's in high school. And so it's the arts and the STEM academy together. And that was one of their electives, so they got their half credit in doing that. And they're still in post-production right now, but then they'll be going up on the radio in rotation. And they get to hear themselves.
We have high school interns regularly.
Yeah.
Because they can get credit in our district.
Yeah.
We
So,
offer
like
extra
Washington has Running Start too.
Yeah.
So there may be a way to integrate credit through Running Start into your program.
I just want to recognize that everyone has a different level of interest in terms of the thirst for knowledge or experience, or some people just aren't interested in being exposed to those experiences, but some are. An example is in one of the youth programs at KAOS, this one kid just loves being on air. He just loves being on air so much. And he lives in Wilsonville. He catches the bus there once a week. And he's just there, like, so excited to be in the station, and he's like buzzing around and eating the snacks. But he travels like 5 hours a day to get to be there because he just loves being on air. Not everyone is going to love that. Some people are going to love other things like credit or stipends or whatever. But and also I was going to say middle school and elementary, because I do most of my canvassing in elementary and middle schools. Kids are so eloquent, and like, they might not be the person behind the camera. Actually, sometimes they are the person behind the camera, and that's also awesome. But it's about opportunity, and specifically, I understand there's a lot of special charter schools in Portland, but the Title I schools, those are the schools I'm working with, and they might not have like access to that technology, but once they do, it's like been amazing seeing some of the results. I'll just, really quick story, like one kid who, 5th grade, about to leave elementary school, the principal was like, giving up on him. He had behavioral stuff because of trauma. And then I got an X Games photographer to come in, and he taught like a bunch of them, and he taught that kid, and that kid was the best photographer ever. And we had an exhibition for him, and he was just like, the last term of his elementary school, finally the principal said, I can't believe that student found his thing finally. And I'm like, that's a weird deficit thinking. That's a weird approach. And some people talked about high school or even beyond, but I'm talking about expectations for kids set so freaking low from such an early age that when they take a photo, their principal is surprised that they can do that. That's ridiculous. So I just want to really reel it back and think about how equity and capital and all those things are built differently for different communities and different people, and value as well. So just thinking about that, and how do you give people your resources? You literally just give them to them so that they can use them with no barriers, 0 barriers.
What about also just sort of professional connections? I feel like especially in Portland, it can be very hard to network, and it's a lot about who you know, and I think maybe there are opportunities where if you can express their interests and they're not necessarily interested in working at your organization, but you can help them connect to other professionals where they do want to be, I think that can be really invaluable.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because something that we've been doing, there's an after-school program that's been running since February here for youth 15 to 18 called ECHO Air. It's an artisan residency program. And youth from that program, during the duration of the program, we were inviting artists in from all kinds of places, like graffiti artists, multimedia artists. We also were reaching out to different organizations, and we found an organization called Instrument, and they're like a production and consulting firm. They invited us to their place, talked to the youth about how you don't need to get straight A's to work here. So they had their staff tell stories about when they were young and how they got into the industry. And I saw an 180-degree shift in the youth that we were working with, from being like kind of heads down, like not really like sure, to like, I can do this. Right. I could work here, because this building that we were in was incredible and beautiful, and just like, I don't even feel comfortable approaching the building, you know, but after that meeting, and after we sat down and had dinner, right, which is also really important. Mm-hmm. Do some outreach to some organizations that are like that in your communities. Talk to them about we're working with youth, we're trying to motivate. What can you provide us? Can we sit down and have dinner? They ended up paying for the dinner. Yeah. They ended up giving swag out and inviting us back. They ended up coming back. So the youth made a really cute thank you video because they were so grateful. And then they ended up turning around doing an office like bake sale and are funding some of our scholarships now for summer camps. So just doing a little bit of hey to different organizations that don't even necessarily have to be super connected in multimedia. Yeah, totally. But that was the professional development that just, it's a spark. And then it's less work then for you. Then the youth just take it and they go, just like this photographer. If that wouldn't have happened, they wouldn't have gone. Yeah. If we wouldn't have had the instrument dinner, they wouldn't. You know.
I just recently took a tour of Garner Holt Productions, animatronics. He did all the Christmas Story characters, and it was real interesting to hear this story. You know, he always wanted to do this. I mean, before he was 16, he was going to build robots that moved and talked and walked. And make a long story short, he went to Disney, and they wouldn't hire him because he didn't have that, you know, $300,000, $400,000 college degree. Yeah. But he went ahead and did it himself, and now he's making their stuff. Yeah, cool. So, and again, without that college degree. So that's an interesting story. Like you said, you don't always have to have that education that's, you know, that you're not going to be happen to you. My age.
in response to your question, so one of my best friends works at Instrument, and it's like, what? But everything that I know, I learned through Google. Like when I first moved here, I was like, Black African American organizations in Portland. Cool. That's who I'm going to give money to. That you know, youth partnerships, volunteer. Blah, blah. I just Googled everything, and then I built a database, and then I did the thing where I said I emailed. I just asked people. SEI, I asked recently, I'm like, can I help you? How can I help you? The second thing I was going to say is everything I know, all the people that I know in this room and beyond, is because I worked. Like, because I gave people, I always approach with what I can give people before I ask for anything back. So, everyone I know is I know through the work that I've done. I have never just networked without that first exchange of like, hey, here's what I can give to your community and like, you know, assist you with.
Yeah. And yeah, I think like mentorship is definitely like, you know, mentorship and guidance is a key piece, and it doesn't have to look like the traditional sense of like, you know, sitting down one-on-one talking and stuff. One of the other roles that I do, I serve on the youth engagement committee for KAOS Public Radio, and that's just starting up. So I've been sort of working on the background scenes of that. But you know, it's basically a program, and like it's like advertised through different schools, like, you know, high schools and colleges. And then there's like a database. I think database collection too, of like keeping that data and keeping track of it, because I feel like so many times in community media we're just like, okay, we made that connection, we did that, like, you know, I got it in my brain, so it'll stay there forever. And like in reality, it's gone 4 or 5 days. So like keeping that collection of people and you know, really making those networks out and realizing like if somebody is a politician, you know, they can teach about community media in the sense of communications of what that looks like. If somebody is a print journalist and they don't necessarily work in an outlet, you know, they're still working to interview people for their stories. So making those connections, and you can make a connection with almost any person with the work that they're doing in some sort of form of community media. And I guess that's what I've gotten to learn too. Like, you don't need to necessarily be working in a community media outlet to be an advocate or working in community media. But I think, yeah, just recognizing those important people who want to help out in the community in any capacity, but also people who work in all different types of roles, you know. And basically, like, there are mixers that are hosted too, and like some of them are like more formal, like practice interviewing and stuff, but like some are just like rock climbing, you know. Rock climbing with like, you know, and then there's like the adult professionals and then the youth that are doing that, and then they like will compete and like get all like competitive and stuff and build a bond, you know, and all different types of stuff. So
build a
Build a bond, like
Okay.
bond, yeah. Connection.
Building a barn?
But yeah, I think if you can link them to any sort of mentor or guidance person that's not necessarily even working in that outlet, that will help them tenfold in the work that they give back to you.
I got a question for you. You have a lot of passion and excitement. If we could get like every kid to be like you, we'd be jamming. But if you look back on your life like 20 years and you say, this is why I am who I am today because of what? What is it that the media or this atmosphere is giving you that will help us as we go and work with other kids?
I think I'm here because I grew up in foster care. I was there since I was 11 years old, and I personally always felt like that need to have a voice and be able to be heard throughout there. So for a while my outlet, because I didn't know about media or community media, my outlet was foster youth advocacy, going around, going to the legislature and testifying and doing all these things. And I feel like it was specifically empowering to me because I was in the system at the time that I was doing those things. So I could have an experience with a group home or a foster home and be okay, I'm not okay with this, and you know what? I'm just gonna advocate for this bill to get passed so we don't have to deal with this. So, but I think just the need to have a voice for myself, but also project the voices of people that I know around me. Who I know are doing important work and more important things, but aren't necessarily as outspoken to look at those avenues and stuff. So I'm really passionate about being able to give other people a platform to share their stories because of the fact that I felt like I couldn't always share mine.
I've been thinking about this a lot while we've been talking is how if people don't see models or if people don't see how things can work, then they don't think that it can work in the future. Because I realized that the reason I'm always teach people stuff, teach people as much stuff as possible for free, anytime they want. That's my model of what I do. Because when I was 15, we were houseless when I was in 6th grade, and then we got placed in a government building thing, and then when I was 14 or 15, this youth worker, so I just got a piece of paper just handed to me randomly, and it just said guitar lessons, DJing lessons, whatever, and it was $5, and it was a 12-week course for not much money, and we didn't have any money, but I was like, I really want to learn guitar, and I showed up, and I think to me that was one model that I obviously still practice all the time, of just a space that they just decided to put on some stuff, had a really crappy flyer, and it was enough for me to be I want to learn that. I have no other way of learning this. And now I'm meeting a bunch of ragtag, rebels doing the same, playing Bad Green Day on acoustic guitar. Yeah. So my point is I'm so impressionable at that age. So at that age, you're just oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. And I've obviously still carried that to now. I'm it is the best thing ever. How do I reproduce that? So other people are still inspired and excited to be in places. So anyway, I appreciate you asking that question. Even though that wasn't for me, I just wanted to.
That's good because you're saying what connected you at that young age was that space.
Yeah.
So I think as we look at how do we keep our youth engaged,
yeah.
It's not just here's a class, here's a camera, okay, thanks for that production, see you.
Yeah.
It's how do we make them want to hang around? What are you guys still doing here?
Yeah.
Kind of kick them out the door. Go. Make them want to just hang out.
They became my surrogate family for sure. Her name's Cassie Hatton. I still remember, but she was just this white lady that I was you're I don't know you very well, but you just gave me all this stuff, and now I love you. Yeah. So it became almost a drop-in center, Yeah. So, engage with kids. Engage with them. They'll like it, and they'll remember it.
It's true. I had in 7th grade, I think what put me on this trajectory, I had a teacher it was a reading teacher, Mrs. Johnson. She had a problem with cookies, a lot of them in her desk. But she pulled me aside one day and told me that she thought I would make a good politician. And I was like, what? Because I grew up pretty poverty-stricken, not much, opening the fridge, great, nothing, great. And had some time as a teenager where I was living without a permanent housing. But she believed in me, and it was bizarre to me because I hadn't had teachers do that. But she pulled me aside one day and she said, you really good at connecting with people. And I think that you could do something in politics. And I was like, yeah. And then she also told me this token of wisdom, which was surround yourself with good people and you won't have problems in life, like really major problems, because those people that are good will be, and I don't mean good in like a way where we're judgmental or whatever, but like who are there for you, basically, is what she was trying to get at. And that's been the best advice. And I still remember Mrs. Johnson to this day because she gave me that advice. And it was reflected actually in, I just had a phone conference with the Alliance for Community Media. We're helping produce this thing called The Issue. It's an online zine, basically, a multimedia zine. And we had a kind of roundtable discussion, kind of like this one. And I invited a youth who we've worked with in the past, who actually is literally working for production services at Open Signal now, and doing his own production work as well. And he came through our drop-in after-school program. And this question was actually posed to him, so I'm really glad that you asked as well. And his response was that what kept him coming was the other youth. It kept him motivated to keep working on his projects because it wasn't just his project. It was his crew's project. So that formation of a bond and working on a crew with other youth, the other youth kept him coming. Because, not because he didn't want to let him down, but because it excited him to be part of something, right? So that's another, what I've heard.
I think what you just said is very important when we're talking about today's youth. My grandson used to live with us, and I would say, this is your job. And he says, well, I'm going to go out my buds and have them help me with it. So they're not thinking as individuals so much as in their group of friends. So that people in my age group have to think a little differently about how to engage youth. Okay, that made no sense.
Do you have a question, Betty?
No.
That came out of that? It was
I
a
just
good.
wanted to share that.
It was a good story. Yeah.
Are any of you engaging youth in the actual development of the programs and into leadership roles in your organization?
Absolutely.
And how are you doing that, and what recommendations do you have for organizations wanting to
Pokemon.
engage youth more that way?
Pokemon, no,
Yes.
just kidding.
Being up on all the youth,
Yeah.
all the youth interests. So that's a great question, and we actually designed a specific internship role this summer, where we're going to have a youth come in, and it's called our workshop design intern. So they're actually going to help us design our programming for this following year, and also for our camps next year as well, because who would know better than youth themselves what they want to learn and what platforms they want to use and what have you. Another thing that is integral to the curriculum here, because we do have set curriculum, and especially because we do receive grants that we need to meet certain guidelines, like there are learning objectives that are, set in stone or what have you. But part of the basis for the curriculum here and part of the training that we run, which is called the Teach to Learn training, right, is that you must know what your students need and want out of the class. So instituting something that allows your instructors or whomever is running the programs that gives them the ability to be organic with their curriculums. So even if you have a set list of things, to keep your mind open to being organic and being able to change, which if you're in this industry, that's a very valuable skill, being able to change when things aren't going exactly as planned. So just keeping that open and allowing the change.
That's an extension of what you said about saying yes, finding new ways to say yes. And even when there isn't a question, think of a question and say yes to it, which is, how do I make the youth the teacher in this room? How do I build mentorships between 5th graders and 2nd graders, or 11th graders and 7th graders? How do I build those relationships? Because in trauma-informed care, the strongest thing that builds resilience with any person that has dealt with adverse childhood experiences is one solid adult relationship, one solid caregiver in your life, one person that inspires you. That is enough to help people be resilient for future traumas. But yeah, how do we? So I do a thing where we always ask, like, what do you want? What do you want? We'll do it next week. We'll start next week. Okay, cool. We'll do it. Following through all the time, never saying yes, we'll do it, and not doing it. Always keeping promises, because kids remember.
They'll remember.
Yeah.
And so that comes into when we were talking about earlier when we were doing outreach, to write that down So write down what you'd say when they, like we usually do attendance, and as we're doing attendance, asking, what are you here for? What do you want to learn? Write it down next to their name. Keep it track of it. They'll see you doing that and be like, "Do you actually like paying attention to what I'm saying?" Yeah, I am, because I care. Write that down. Make the changes, and then I think as a follow-up, give them credit for that valuable idea that they just gave you. If they're helping run your classes better and helping you engage more youth, tell them that. And professionally, and we want to just recognize that so-and-so helped develop this curriculum, use these words that are professional words, and they're just going to be, I just helped develop curriculum at 7, yes you did, at 12, yes you did, because you're just as smart.
And I think you can decide to, as an organization, what sort of tasks you can give more creative autonomy to youth and students to, and versus what ones, serving in those different roles, of being, there are some things that are very the programming, on-air programming stuff that are very cut and dry as far as FCC regulations and what you need to do. But there might also be other opportunities where instead of being a manager or supervisor, you could be more of an overseer of the work that they're doing. Maybe if they're doing a youth-based fundraising event, or even just a PSA that they're recording and stuff like that, really giving them the creative autonomy to not only task them with a project, but show them all of the different areas that you work, and then ask them and then guide them to where they want to do it. And I think that connection too between between a youth and a project, and also other youth, but specifically that project-based learning where you decide yourself is very important. I know for a fact that's what's driven me to be able to know I can identify new things in community media and then work on it, versus being tasked on what somebody else might think that is important when there's so many things that are important.
Oh, just to add on to that, from when I started interning the very first week, my supervisor was asking me oh, so what do you want to work on a project? Because I was scheduled to work on city council broadcasts and stuff that's obviously not, I don't have a lot of creative input in, but from day one it was well, hey, let's see, there's do you want to do a PSA about something? Do you want to make a station ID? Just pick something and we'll help you figure out how to do it. And so then I end up making a PSA, and I just told my supervisor the idea. She's like, great, all right, so let's make you a reservation for the camera, and need help finding, it was just finding projects that I can just do, and along with the other stuff that's more rigid. And that really made me want to come back, because then it's oh, I can just do my own stuff too. I can also enjoy this.
You get ownership in it now.
Yeah, right. And then it's oh, that's my thing on, that's my piece of the whole organization right there.
You truly get to have a stake in it. Be that community.
This is somewhat unrelated, but I'm a IRCO volunteer, and I've been matched with a family, a refugee family, and then I've been working with this kid for almost 10 years now. He's in high school, and his parents will never let him do any non-school related activities, so no theater or sports or anything, because they don't live in Portland anymore, unfortunately, but they've never kind of gotten over the getting used to America and not feeling scared about their kid running around. He can leave with me, but not really friend's house. He doesn't have access to these kinds of programs, is my point. And since working at Metro Weeks, I've seen a couple kids where that might be a little true for as well, just because of that cultural difference, and just, it's scary leaving your country and starting a life somewhere new. So my question for you guys is, have you ever come up to that challenge before, and what is a way around that? How do you reach those kids so they're not left behind with the access to all these amazing resources?
Right. Start something real quick. What about reaching out to the parents and trying to include them into the mix of things, and trying to make them trying to show them more things that make them more comfortable with different activities that might be useful.
Yeah.
But that's just.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think that, because I was going to comment on what you said as well, because some people don't know what they want to do, and there's a lot of barriers even just imagining what they could do. Because especially if you haven't grown up in a place where there's a bunch of media, and media is really big, and it's the most important force in this country, if you don't know what media even looks like or sounds like, well, then why would you want to go into it? Kind of addressing what you're saying is culturally, there are lots of cultural reasons why media is irrelevant, unimportant, and not something that seems to be useful for kids, for people's youth, for people's families. There's a lot of reasons why. So yeah, involving families. I'm not sure how to answer this question simply because it's kind of like it's a kind of a very comprehensive program, right? But for example, recently I've been training some of my families, like I have like 40 families that are all undocumented, in advocacy and how to even what the system looks like in the States and how to go to the city council open meeting and the budget forum and even those steps, which they didn't know how to do. So and then the language and writing it down and reading out loud. All of these folks are new to English as well, so that's another barrier again. But kind of just breaking things down. So no matter what it is, breaking it down so that folks understand its function. Like, why is this useful? Why do you want me to come to a meeting? And I'm like, because then that has an influence on the future of your kid in the school, for example. So not everyone will understand all the time why media even exists, but kind of stepping back and giving context and saying, well, it exists because in a purely democratic world, media is meant to have influence, and media is meant to give everybody an equal voice, even though it doesn't at all. So, and if that's the case, then how do we then give people that opportunity to share their voice? But I'm going to be frank with you. I had to, when those guitar lessons that I had, I lied to my parents about what they were, because there was no way my dad was going to let a daughter, a girl, play music. And that was like, until I was 21, I was not allowed to touch any musical instruments, but of course I just told myself anyway. So sometimes it's something that you might not understand, but they'll figure it out, and there's no room for any judgments or room for any culturally relative decisions, you know what I mean? Like, you know, things happen for a reason, and sometimes it's not even our place to even talk to the parents, especially if it outs them in some way. So it's complicated. So it depends on what the kids want, and then it depends on their culture and what their preference is. So I just wanted to say that it's very complicated, but I'm trying to answer your question very short. Yeah.
Did that teacher charge you the $5 for those classes?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important too when you think of like youth or just any people to think of like the worldview. Like, you know, there are different worldviews that we all think of based off of like our socio and cultural economics, like, you know, stances, and like how we grew up and who our parents are and our grandparents, you know. So like a lot of the times there are like communication barriers because of the fact that, you know, you may be like just saying one thing or like putting it out there, but it may be perceived as a completely different thing, you know, just because of the person, of what the person may think of what you're speaking. So like, especially when you're like thinking about like LGBT youth or like, you know, like cultural youth or just like people of color in general, like oftentimes there is that, you know, you're already working to sort of be a rebel in the field of communications when you're working in community media. So you're also like a sort of an outcast in the overall communications and the overall communications of society.
Totally,
so
yeah.
It's hard to break that barrier to even get involved with it.
Yeah.
So I think just, you know, trying to inform yourself of whatever way of like what that person's culture is, or like how they were raised, or like how their parents, because I guess the main example I have in my head is when I work with the International Foster Care Alliance, we do back and forth advocacy between Japanese and American foster youth, and like basically because of the whole atmosphere of Japan, it's almost seen as rude in a sense, you know, because youth aren't supposed to be like really teaching their elders, you know. So there's that whole barrier of like we're going into this space, but you know, before we can even do any work, you know, we have to we have to break this communication down and see like what are truly the benefits of being able to have youth train them. So.
And seeing what's respectful. And the last thing, can't believe I haven't mentioned this already. Obviously, your staff should be reflecting the community members that you're trying to serve. So if you're trying to serve youth and get youth to talk to youth, as opposed to getting not a youth talking to youth, because that means so much. It's such a difference if a high school student is telling other high school students to come into a space. And similarly, if you're working with immigrant communities or if you're working with people of color, whatever, is your staff and other people talking to them even reflecting them, or is it just this very alienating process of, I don't understand what you like and what you don't like, but anyway, come hang out, you know, like set up this example of like, I'm going to disrespect you now before you even come into our service. So yeah, so reflecting and mirroring and being culturally responsive is super important.
Thank you all so much. We do have to wrap up, but I do want to end with a round of applause for everyone who came in here. You should give yourself credit for coming in here and give us credit too, because we're awesome too. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Basketball.
Don't forget to take off your mics. Yeah.